Man, another EUC Unplugged. And my man looks like he's in a fortress with all the, I mean, that's heavy wood right there. But I have Kees Baggerman here, and I got to say, and I don't even know sometimes if I pronounce everything right when I'm dealing with with the Dutch, right? It's a little different, right? Like I say Utrecht, and they go, no, you're not saying
No.
it right. And I'm like, well, that's how I read it. But I learned this interesting thing, and I didn't know this. So my family came from the south of the United States, and we used to call the people in the north Yankees, right? Oh,
Oh, there you
those
go.
Yankees.
Yep.
I didn't understand that in New York there were Jan and there were a bunch of K's,
Yep.
and they jammed it together, and they're like, "You're one of those Jan K's." It was Yankees. We say Yankees now, but it was because you Dutch were running everything in New York.
I mean, we have our history of, I would say, we had our past of conquering nations and just basically taking what we thought was anything worth. If you live in a country as small as we do, then you better just start grabbing stuff
Well, most people
because,
don't realize that the Dutch, for a lot of years, before the English became the kings of the high seas when they were fighting the Spanish and the French, the Dutch had a maritime.
yep.
Their navy was amazing. They have, like, I didn't know this until I was an older man, but naval heroes and some of the tactics that people developed were all from the Dutch. This little tiny country was like, well, we don't have a lot of land, but we can sail.
Yeah. Well,
Now
we're
you guys,
surrounded by water. I mean, there's something that you have to do with that, right? I mean, you can't just ignore that.
no, and now, and I quite frankly, maybe I can do this. Hey, we don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of land, but we got a lot of people that can do tech. You go to the Netherlands, and there are some geeks in the Netherlands, and that's, you and everybody I've met there are always um, not just very technical, but always going, how do I exploit this tech? How do I make this tech work for me, do something that no one ever thought of? And you see a lot of that in the Netherlands. And it's a very unique situation. And I'm glad to have you on. I know you're at Nutanix. Maybe you can introduce yourself, and
Yep.
let's start with that. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about what's exciting you.
All right, sounds good. So, my name is Kees Baggerman, as you were pronouncing it quite correctly. Thank you for that,
Nice.
Ron.
It took me a while. I called you Keys for a while. I did call you
It
Keys.
happens. It happens. And as you said, I work for Nutanix. Funny story there is that I actually own the email aliases case@nutanix.com, which is like my name.
Yeah.
And then I've got CASE as in like a suitcase.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've got
Keys.
keys, like car keys at
Yeah.
nutanix.com, just to prevent people sending emails that are directed to me or
That
not
also
directed.
that also means you've been at Nutanix a while because you were able to get all those before anybody else.
No, absolutely. This is I'm about to enter 10 years. So I
Wow.
joined Nutanix 10 years ago, coming from a privately owned system integrator in the Netherlands. Um, Started off
That's
as a
that's
solution
interesting.
engineer in
Yeah,
the
that's
solution
interesting.
engineering team.
And that would have been 2014,
Yeah,
ish.
2014. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I remember in the early days of Nutanix, like Jason Langoni, and
Yeah.
him and I would hit things together. We were doing stuff, and he was like, people just don't realize we've got this idea. It's really going to work. And I was looking at it going, man, I like that. That's pretty cool. But he was bought in, and I mean, this is 10 years.
Yeah.
Nutanix isn't some startup. You guys are making hardware that even 10 years ago no one really believed, especially with the local SSD, and you were doing storage replication before everybody else was. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because all of that, Nutanix got some foothold in EUC because they made hardware and EUC people adopt it. And now we're 10 years on. And I was like, man, what does excite people like you? What's making you go, yeah, I get up in the morning, I do this. What should people look at?
All right. So the first thing so listening to kind of that little story that you were telling, the first thing that I that comes into mind is that we're not no longer a hardware company, right? So we built the software stack on top of hardware. So we support a wide variety of OEMs and NX hardware, which is super
Now
micro-branded.
that's interesting, right? Because in the early days of Nutanix, you bought a box,
Yeah.
right?
No,
And I love
absolutely.
those boxes. They were
Yeah.
amazing. But what made them amazing wasn't necessarily the hardware. It was
It
that you
was
had
the software
integrated
stack.
the software, right? And so
Exactly.
now
Yeah.
you're moving away from, hey, we're a hardware vendor. We're trying to do this on top of other platforms.
Exactly. That's what we've done in the last few
Okay.
years. So we've got standing relationships with Dell, HPE, Cisco, Fujitsu, you name them, we've got
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
And I guess part of that was driven by the success that we have with our own NX line with the Supermicro hardware boxes.
Yeah.
And you know, the one thing that pops into mind is the 2U 4-node form factor. That was pretty cool for EUC because
Yeah.
that gave you like 4 nodes in 2U, which gave us like insane densities in a rack compared
Yeah.
to, you know, traditional infrastructure.
And
Now, what gets me excited,
anybody on prem, they were all tight for rack space. They couldn't add
exactly,
storage. They couldn't do anything back then. Yeah.
exactly. And that ties into kind of what gets me excited as well, because what we did early days in Nutanix was, and this is my own free interpretation, but we brought public cloud into an on-prem solution. We
Yeah.
could scale in the way that you did with public cloud. It was easy. It was building blocks. You could do fit for purpose. It was very flexible, yet
Yeah.
very simple and easy to understand.
Yeah.
We had, and if it wasn't easy to understand, we had a fantastic, and we still have a fantastic support organization behind it with some brilliant people, like honestly, brilliant people that help our customers from day to day. Now, kind of what gets me excited is I recall seeing presentations from people like Christian Rowley and Sean Bass about the concept of cloud bursting and moving workloads from on-prem to public cloud and back again, and how that would be like an opportunity in the near future. Now, and I'll take you through some memories here, because you know, we did this whole public cloud to on-prem movement, and that was the first few years. And at a certain point, we bought a company called Frame.
Yep.
From Nikola Bozinovic, was one of the founders, and Nikola and his team did a lot of things very, very well. And one of them was cloud orchestration. So the way that they dealt with different cloud vendors and different regions was very smart, very intelligent, and they clearly put a lot of thought in that. And what we've done as Nutanix, we've taken some of that technology and created a product that we call NC2, or Nutanix Cloud Clusters. And that's basically our software stack running in an AWS or Azure data center as of now. And obviously there's you know, talks about other hyperscalers, but right now AWS and Azure. And what we can do is run our stack on top of the bare metal instances in AWS or Azure, which gives you the flexibility of public cloud. You can kind of stretch into an Azure or AWS region, make use of their pop-ups, their colos, their hardware, their support, all of that, yet you're the owner of the data.
Well, yeah, and that's a big thing, right? Where the data lives, who owns it, who manages where it sits. But I think there's something interesting there. So, you know, Nutanix has always been a hybrid play, that they believe since the beginning. Cloud is great. It's not for everything. Sometimes you need data local, sometimes you need compute local. And there's been a big push lately. I just was an article I just saw a couple of days ago, a Gartner or one of the major industry was talking about 80% of big corporations are looking at what they call repatriation, which is, hey, we might have went too far in cloud. Not we want to get rid of cloud. We might have went too far. We need to now look at, how do I get compute at the optimal cost? How do I get storage at the optimal cost, et cetera? And you guys have been saying that for like 6-7 years. Like you shouldn't put everything up there just because it's great. And on the EUC front, we know it's about data location, compute, all those fine points in cloud, they come down to exactly what it's not some database.
No, exactly. No, and it's like, it's such an interesting field to be in, and the ability of moving workloads even live workloads from an on-prem to a public cloud vendor has been something that a lot of people have been chasing. And with Nutanix Cloud Clusters and our on-prem solution, we can actually achieve that. So we can move workload from one side to another without refactoring golden images or refactoring images in general.
No driver changes, none of that stuff.
Nothing like that.
Yeah.
It's like what you have on-prem and what you have in public cloud. It's the same UI, same look and feel, same tool set. So everything from that perspective stays the same, and that simplifies the overall solution. And what really gets me excited is thinking about that kind of next step, right? So the ability of having multiple platforms and having like that abstraction layer across hardware, wherever that hardware lives, in public cloud, on-prem, co-location, doesn't matter. But then, having the ability actually enables us to do even smarter things. So what if we do like cost analysis or data analysis, and we can say, based on our analysis, this SQL server that you're running in on-prem today might be better off running in Azure because of
cost
modeling,
optimization, whatever it happens to be, the storage, the IO, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So let's
and
move that
you guys want to look at that both from an infrastructure standpoint and an EUC standpoint. Are you guys doing analysis on that? Or are you guys starting to like allowing customers to say, here's my price for instance X or storage Y?
Yeah, that's one of the things that so one of the acquisitions that we did a few years ago was actually geared towards that. So right now it's cost and governance. That's the module that we have. And that's exactly that. So it gives you the opportunity to punch in whatever your ELA is with the hyperscaler and say, I can run storage at, X $cent, CPU at Y, and put in the metrics and then do the analysis saying, hey, if I run this workload for 5 days in AWS, it will cost me X. If I do the same in Azure, it's going to be X% cheaper or more expensive. That ability drives so many opportunities for us as technologists.
Yeah.
Like not being tied into a data center anymore. Like you said, a lot of companies are still kind of tied to the floor space that they have, the power, the cooling, whatever the metric is.
Well, and even then, even if it's not that they're tied, right? They do. When I was growing up in IT, and I think I have more gray hair than you do, sir. People used to have this saying, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. That was the saying, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays you can get fired for hiring IBM, but one of the things that you could attribute this now, no one ever got fired for going to Azure, right? You could almost say that.
Yeah.
But the flip side is that every Azure customer that I've had to talk to, now maybe that's bias because they came to us for some reason. Hey, we think we're spending more or whatever, right? But everyone goes, here's what Microsoft recommended.
Yeah.
We want to test and know, can I use lower? Can I use a different instance? Can I use how does it compare to on-prem? All that. But now, of course, nobody likes anybody challenging what they quoted. But as a vendor, and I've worked at a vendor, if I was hosting a cloud solution, do I want to under design an EUC environment, or do I want to over design it? If I give them a machine that's higher quality, but it costs more and their experience is better, they might not notice. They might just be happy with the experience. But if I give them a machine to get them a lower cost and the performance is awful, who's getting a phone call, right?
Yeah.
So in most cases, what Microsoft does is default higher, right? Which I would do if I was there. I would say, well, we might get away with this. I'm going to move up one level. Customers overpay for capacity, for storage, for GPUs, for memory allocations, whatever, right? I think that shepherds a little bit of people moving on-prem, but I also think that there's the technical data that says sometimes you have to have the execution on-prem. You have to have it close to there. You figure out where your data locks. And I actually think it's been terrible for Nutanix that everybody went crazy cloud, because I'm like, oh, 3 years into crazy cloud, everyone starts talking about hybrid. And now they're not even using the word hybrid. They're talking about repatriation.
Yep.
And it's just interesting to me watching that from an EUC perspective, watching things move to the cloud, move back on prem, and watching some folks that have been around for 10 years that have a great platform to, we don't need to replicate our disks that much, right? We don't
Right.
have to have them in high cost storage. We just need some IO, and then we need the actual data from the applications to land in the app. So it's interesting to me watching that. But what do you see in this kind of, we're nearing the end of 2024, right? We're going to go into 2025. World economy has been kind of flat. We've all seen the business environments that we're in. 2025, I do expect it to start picking up, right? People are kind of coming out of this. What do you excite you? What do you think the next big thing from an EUC perspective this year will be? Like looking at AVD Tech Fest and EUC World and all the communities that we have. If K's had to say, I want to go see a session on X, what's freaking awesome
right.
for you?
So if I would start, let me put that in a different perspective. If I would start a company right now, and I would look at the problems that we're facing from an EUC perspective, I think it's been a problem that hasn't been solved yet. And I think most problems that we see in the EUC world comes from image management and poorly maintained or not well maintained images. So if there's
it's a problem
product,
of both Microsoft and the management, just to be honest.
this is multifaceted. Absolutely.
That's a great term. It's multifaceted. Yeah.
And there hasn't been and as you know, we test like every single Microsoft OS that comes out. We test it until it's like burned out and done, and then we test.
You guys do beat up on those operating systems.
Absolutely, we tend to kind of go the extra mile. I've never seen an operating system in the last 5 years that actually performed better than previous one. Right, so there's always like a decrease in performance, which means that we have to do more.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there's still a lot of uncertainty and maybe people being uninformed about the impact of that operating system or that OS change or this new version of M365 or whatever, CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, whatever you have, what the impact is. And I guess what would interest me from a session perspective is if there's a company that could solve or help us with image management and making sure that, or making visible what the changes are and making sure that we can relate that into, all right, so Ron did a wonderful job in kind of setting up this environment. Kees came in, he installed Windows updates and did some patching on Office, and now all of a sudden it runs 20% worse than before. But there's absolutely no way to actually keep track of that than
what actually made the change. Where is it happening in the because it's not. Is it CPU? Is it memory? Is it disk IO? What process is running? Yeah. No, that's an interesting thing. And I think that in a world where, we in IT have all moved to the cloud, right? We love the cloud.
Yeah.
Consumers, while they have apps that have cloud backend, they got compute on their watch, they got a phone in their pocket, a laptop in front of them. They have a lot of distributed compute. And I think that we're starting to see this divergence between how business is operating daily and they're trying to take our old stuff into the new world. And what we're ignoring is that concept that I still put an i7 processor in a cheap laptop. Wait a minute, I got a lot of processor I'm not using. If we talk about a business perspective, or if we talk about an ecological perspective, right? We want to save energy and all. Why would I have an i7 that does nothing? How do I distribute compute? How do I do? I think you guys are on an interesting, because I know no one talks about it much, but I know you guys supply like some IP and stuff to cloud providers, right? I know there's some cloud providers that are doing that. I think that there's a kind of an inflection point coming in this next couple of years where people are going to go, no, it's not all cloud or not on-prem. It's really a hybrid. And they're going to have to start making decisions on what lives where. And it'll be interesting to see how Nutanix deals with that, because EUC was a huge initial play because EUC guys are risk takers, right? We'll try something new. It wasn't like the SQL admins were like, send me your Nutanix in 2014. But now it's a different story. When you talk about databases and file shares and all that, it's a very different story.
Oh, absolutely. If I just look at kind of the solutions engineering team where I'm part of,
Yeah.
we cover a lot of ground. So it's I do EUC, we've got a team specialized in databases, we've got a team specialized in healthcare, cloud native, hybrid multi-cloud, and then there's healthcare, and
Yeah.
SAP.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I mentioned that before. So taking a look at SAP and healthcare, for example. So SAP is a monster app.
It's huge.
Like I could not have envisioned us like 10 years ago that we would be where we are today. And part of that is the product. Part of that is fantastic engineers that know what they're doing. Same goes for healthcare. The fact that Epic for example, Epic opened up their honor roll for HCI because our efforts in that space.
Yeah. And Epic honor roll, let's not jump over that. Getting on Epic honor roll is a big thing in North America. It's huge because they look at every timing between every component in their system. Yeah, and if you were part of that, you know the word latency. They're always trying to minimize latency in between. That's a big deal. That's a huge, and Epic right now is trying to push people to go to, which in EUC, I don't know that we really care, but a client more on an endpoint device talking to the back end, and they're trying to get out of the terminal server, Citrix, centralized world. You only do that if the performance matches people's expectations beforehand.
And the thing is, they've got so much control, so much intelligence, so much data on their platform that they can really be prescriptive of what they need, what they want, how they want it to be configured, how it should respond, and which bandwidth it should respond. And for us, that's a great measurement of where our platform is.
Yes.
Having the likes of an Epic or an SAP and us
validate what you did.
Exactly. And that benchmarking against their standards is such an incredible thing to see. And let's get back to the point that you made around EUC being risk takers.
Ooh, yeah.
I think part of it comes from the thought that EUC is an easy workload. And I do air quotes for the people who are listening, not looking. People seem to think that EUC is just a workload that you can throw around. It's easy. It's just a few desktops. If it's not persistent, we'll spin something up.
Yep.
They're your crown jewels. They're the first thing people would see to interface with your line of business
applications, your data, your customers.
Yes. So they're not an easy workload. It's, it's quite complicated to if you dive into all of the details to kind of understand the impact of all of these nuances. But they're your first interaction with the corporation, whatever you do. Is not something that you just should toss around and test out.
What's funny about that case is that you just said something that I try to preach, but I think from a startup or a business perspective, especially when it comes to EUC, focus on the customer. Don't think about the simple workload. Oh, it's server people, and I was a server guy, right? It's a Windows desktop. Just turn my back on it, right? It's like, no, you don't understand. It's got different read IO. It's got different this. We should listen to the customers. If you listen, and you guys have done a good job. The customer says A, we want A, great, we'll give you A, right? Sometimes in these big companies like Microsoft, you don't get A back. You get what they think A should be. And
here's our version of A.
Yeah. Here's our version of A. All right. We're almost at the end here. I want to ask you, are you doing any speaking events? You got any speaking events coming up or anything, or anybody on your team? Because the data coming out of your team that I see in our tools is amazing. And I think people should talk about it. What you guys got coming up, man?
So there's there's a
you guys are at AVD Tech Fest in the Netherlands, I'm pretty sure.
No, not AVD Tech Fest. We'll be at Disrupt.
Disrupt.
The Citrix Nutanix event in Ireland in a few weeks. We'll present at the World of EUC.
World of EUC.
So I'm presenting with our performance mastermind Sven Huisman.
Nice.
he's just incredible, and we're
I was
presenting at the
talking. I was
World
talking to Blair. I think he might have mentioned that guy. He was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I was talking to this guy at Nutanix. He went over my head." I think it might have been that guy. Now, this
Yeah,
is a
Sven
dude who's a 7-year performance engineer. Heard something went over his head.
Sven is pretty incredible. So Dave will be in at Disrupt. I'll be with Sven at World of EUC. Jaron will be there as well.
Jargon will be
Um,
there. Yep.
Obviously James Kinden, he's based in Australia, so he's kind of in, far away from the rest of us. And he does whatever he wants because he's out of kind of the limited time that I have with him. So
Yeah, you get 12 minutes every other Tuesday or something.
That's correct.
Kees, I love to catch up with you. It's been awesome. And I think what we're looking at is a little bit of shift in EUC, right? Things are consolidating. We've seen it. They're consolidating around the data center, actually, whether it's the cloud or you're on-prem. But I think the old days of EUC, who found the right script to make Office work? I think that's gone. And I think now we have to deal with these types of things.
Yeah.
Where's the right location for our CPUs? Where's how we do storage? And if people aren't looking at what you guys are doing or the data your team puts out, they're kind of missing out. And I just wanted to have you on and shit, I just wanted to hear from you, man.
It's much appreciated. And the feeling is completely mutual. I always love catching up with you. It's always good fun. So.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right. You're welcome, man. Talk to you later.
Thank you.